Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Friday, March 17th, 2023. The Irish Prime Minister Leo Varadkar visiting Washington for St. Patrick's Day, meeting with Vice President Kamala Harris at her residence for breakfast, and then President Joe Biden at the White House in the Oval Office, and on Capitol Hill, a luncheon with President Biden and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, both of Irish heritage, who put aside any political differences to jointly welcome their guests. We'll have all that coming up. Plus, from the C-SPAN video library, a look back to St. Patrick's Day 1986, when then President Ronald Reagan and House Speaker Tip O'Neill, also both Irish and of different political parties, together welcomed and joked with the Irish Prime Minister. Also today, the International Criminal Court issuing an arrest warrant for Russian President Vladimir Putin and another Russian official on allegations of war crimes involving the unlawful deportation of children from Ukraine to Russia. It's been a week of economic unease surrounding bank failures and near failures. It's come to an end, and we'll talk about the state of the economy with a Wall Street Journal senior writer, John Hilsenrath, steps being taken and contemplated to avoid a recession. Former law clerks to the late Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg today celebrating her memory. And even politicians getting caught up in March Madness, the NCAA Division I basketball tournament. We'll hear from a U.S. House freshman who's organized a contest. Associated Press writing, sporting a green tie and fresh shamrocks for St. Patrick's Day, President Joe Biden on Friday voiced his support for a recent economic accord affecting Ireland as he hosted the Republic's prime minister, a long-standing meetup scuttled by the COVID-19 pandemic 2 years in a row. President Biden was presented with a bowl of shamrocks from Leo Varadkar, known as the Taoiseach, a tradition that began in 1952. The two leaders met in the White House Oval Office.
Welcome. It's good to have you back in the Oval Office, Taoiseach. Especially on St. Patrick's Day. And it's a big day in my grandparents' household, our household, big day here, and I know a bigger day home. But thank you very much. And there is a Yeats's phrase about I think there's where a man's most glory begins and ends is the glory to have such friends. Well, you've been a great friend. You've been a great friend of the United States, and Ireland and the United States share friendship and long traditions. And I guess you do know, coming here as many times as you have, how many Americans look forward to St. Patrick's Day. And as millions of Americans of Irish heritage, we have a joke, and we have an event that we used to do as vice president, and it's now done up in the Hill, which just says we invite all the friends of Ireland, all the Irish members of the Congress, and those who wish they were. I want to thank you on a substantive matter, standing together on Ukraine. It means a great deal, speaking out against Russia's brutal aggression and our deepening economic ties. We have a lot to talk about. And, I've spent some time with the Prime Minister of Great Britain, and I've very strongly supported the Windsor framework, which I know you do too. Maybe we'll get a chance to talk about that. And for us, the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement is something that a very good friend of mine devoted a lot of his life to, George Mitchell, and that's critical. So I'm looking forward to meeting you and having our celebration together, and a lot to talk about. The floor is yours.
Thank you, President. Tá áthas arm bheithan seo san teachbáin agus tá muid buíoch as an Uachtaráin don tacaíocht maidir le Brexit agus de ceannaireacht maidir leis an cogadh in Ukraine. Agus atá méid tanú leis de cuairt mór go héireann beidh sé cuairt den sco Galway, so Galway mother. So first of all, thanks so much for inviting me to be here. I really appreciate the invitation. Really want to thank you for your help and support and understanding for our position on Brexit in recent years. really made a difference, and we've got to a good place now, I think, with the Windsor framework where we can have an agreement that lasts, which is important for Northern Ireland and also important for British, Irish and European relations. Really profoundly want to thank you and America for your leadership in relation to Ukraine. I never thought we'd see a war like this happen in Europe in my lifetime. America is at its best when it stands with its European partners to defend freedom and democracy. And thank you for that. And I know you'll stay the course for us, with us, and we'll stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes. And also really looking forward to your visit. I promise you that we're going to roll out the red carpet, and it's going to be a visit like no other. Everyone's excited about it already. We're going to have great crowds who would love to see you, and look forward to talking about some of the details a bit later.
I look forward to that as well. Thank you all.
President Joe Biden and Irish Prime Minister Leo Varadkar in the White House Oval Office. The Prime Minister also called Taoiseach, that's Gaelic for leader. White House South Lawn fountain dyed green for this St. Patrick's Day. White House has announced that President Biden and former President Bill Clinton will visit the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, which is part of the United Kingdom, to mark the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, a peace deal signed April 10th, 1998, that ended decades of violence over the political status of Northern Ireland. From the White House, President Biden and Prime Minister Varadkar went to Capitol Hill to attend the Friends of Ireland Caucus St. Patrick's Day luncheon, hosted by House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, a Republican from California, who, like President Biden, is of Irish ancestry, and talked about what that means to him.
But to many of you, just like me, our Irish heritage means a great deal to us. You see, my great-grandfather came from Ireland in the 1860s, Jeremiah McCarthy. He did for so many other immigrants come to America to dream of a better land, of a better opportunity. There was a new state in this union, California, so he came across. He worked just like many of the Irish on the railroad. He helped build the railroad when others didn't think it was the right job. He then became a cattle rancher. He had 2 sons who went off. And my father, he became a firefighter like a lot of other Irish. I tried to be a firefighter too. I even took the test. But there was an nepotism clause. So to this day, my mother still does not believe I'm a success yet. But maybe one day I'll be able to be that firefighter. But he left County Cork like so many other Irish. But even though he left his homeland, he never forgot the heritage. He never forgot what it meant to fight for freedom. He never forgot to win the values of friendship, the love for this country. And he always remembered that on one given day, everyone in America is Irish on St. Patrick's Day. I lost my father 23 years ago to cancer. He never had an opportunity to see me elected. He would always try to talk about politics. And if my father was alive today, I don't know if he would come for the State of the Union, but he would come for this lunch. He would want to be here. And so if I may, if I can end with my father's favorite blessing, you know it. May the road rise up to meet your feet. May the wind always be at your back. May the sun shine brightly upon your face. May the rain fall softly in your field. Until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand.
House Speaker Kevin McCarthy at the St. Patrick's Day luncheon on Capitol Hill. In the U.S. Census Bureau's 2020 American Community Survey, about 32 million Americans, almost 10% of the population, identify as being Irish. Speaker McCarthy today also talking about bridging political party differences on this holiday.
You know the political battles at times we would have. And this is a unique time for you to be here. Because for America, we know the stakes are high. That a clash is brewing, people say, between the president and I. Of what should we do? Of what would be the ramifications for the entire nation in the coming months? And I think you might be able to settle this for us. Which one of us is more Irish? And to President Biden, from one Irish American to another, I want to strive every day to live up to the example of President Reagan and Tip O'Neill. Our positions may be reversed, but our goals can be the same, that we put this country first. I've watched an Irish heritage create bonds. Joe Kennedy became a member of Congress. He was a good member of Congress. And now he has a bigger job and a bigger task as an envoy. And he's going to make sure he fights to keep the peace. But he and I became friends simply because of our heritage. And we became close.
House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. After he finished, President Biden also spoke to the St. Patrick's Day luncheon in the U.S. Capitol building, and he, too, called for bipartisanship.
I think we have a chance to make an open history, Ryan, with all our differences. I think those of us who have been coming to this dinner a long time have never been in a case where, from the perspective of the public, the parties and the politics have been so divided as it is now. But I agree with the Speaker. There's no reason why we can't find common ground. There's no reason why we can't hope to change this direction of the extremes in both our parties are pushing. I think it's important. I think it's really important. And that's the power of friendship. I think it's the power of, that's the strength of our partnership if we work at it. And simply put, I think it's the Irish of it. I think it's the Irish of it. So I hope we can turn this breakfast into a more of an everyday relationship, the way we treat everyone in this Congress. There's so many possibilities we have. We can disagree in details, but there's nothing, as I always say, just remember, we're the United States of America. Nothing is beyond our capacity. Whatever we've set our mind to in the past, we've done, no matter what.
When President Biden finished his remarks at the Friends of Ireland Caucus St. Patrick's Day luncheon in the U.S. Capitol, he introduced the guest of honor, Irish Prime Minister Leo Varadkar.
It means so much for me to be back here again as leader of our country on our national holiday. And I'm very pleased that I'm joined in the room by political party leaders from Ireland and Northern Ireland, including Jeffrey Donaldson, Mary Lou MacDonald, Michelle O'Neill, Colm Eastwood, Naomi Long and Doug Beattie, and also the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, Chris Eaton-Harris. It's great to have us all in the same room, and it's been good to be able to interact with each other over the past couple of days. And I have to say, it's a pleasure to be sat next to the Speaker and the President, not to keep the peace, but rather to thank them for doing so much to protect and promote peace and prosperity on the island of Ireland. So congratulations, Speaker McCarthy, on your election to this great office, and thank you so much for continuing the tradition of the Friends of Irish Luncheon. I know 2 years ago, in your St. Patrick's Day message, you said that on this day, everyone is Irish, a sentiment that I think will find unanimous bipartisan support. And I have to say, everyone in Ireland is proud that an Irish American holds the Speaker's gavel, and we wish you the very best in your term as Speaker, and I look forward to working with you on areas of common interest.
Irish Prime Minister Leo Varadkar at the St. Patrick's Day luncheon with President Biden and members of Congress, including Speaker McCarthy. Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick, Republican from Pennsylvania, tweeting today that he is introducing a bill that would make St. Patrick's Day an official federal holiday in the United States. The House met briefly today for a pro forma session, no legislative business, but the House chaplain, Margaret Kibben, offering a St. Patrick's Day themed opening prayer.
On this St. Patrick's Day, may our worries be slight and our troubles few. May we always choose right in whatever we do. Then, O God, may you give us for every storm a rainbow, for every tear a smile, for every care a promise, and a blessing for each trial. For every problem life sends, a faithful friend to share. For every sigh, a sweet song, and an answer for each prayer. Sure of your grace and love this day and always, in your sacred and most holy name we pray. Amen.
House Chaplain Margaret Grun Kibben. Irish Prime Minister's visit to Washington, D.C. began early this morning with a breakfast at the residence of Vice President Kamala Harris. She noted that it was then Vice President Joe Biden, a few years back, who began the tradition of breakfast with the Taoiseach. And she says it was one of his most particular joys, and as you all know, he is quite exuberant in that joy, and I have now caught the bug.
Today is also, of course, a day to celebrate the long-standing relationships and the great pride that we as Americans take in our Irish roots. In the mid-19th century, thousands of Irish immigrants made their way, I will speak now as a point of personal privilege, made their way to California during the gold rush. And as many of you know, most of my career I spent in San Francisco, which has a long and strong pride in its Irish roots. And I will say that the Irish and the immigrants who came generations ago have shaped the history and the culture of the United States, but I will speak in particular about California and its impact there. In 1867, many of you may know, more than a decade before New York or Boston elected an Irish mayor, San Francisco elected Frank McCoppin of County Longford. Yes, I am happy to educate everyone here about these relationships. And one of my favorite stories is of Kate Kennedy, originally from County Meath. She led the Equal Pay for Equal Work campaign in 1874 in California. And of course, just this week, or last week, we here in the United States celebrated Equal Pay Day. Long-standing relationships and commitment based on common values and priorities. And let us fast forward then to 2023. Again, I will make a California reference. At the Oscars earlier this week, Irish talent was nominated for 14 awards and took home 2 wins. And then yesterday, it is my understanding the Taoiseach visited my alma mater, Howard University, to celebrate and strengthen programs between the students there and the Smurfett Business School in Dublin. So through this and many other exchanges, including the pride that both Ireland and the United States take in the relationship between Frederick Douglass and Ireland, we show that through the years, through generations, this is a strong and enduring relationship that makes us all very proud. And so with that happy St. Patrick's Day, I will now raise a glass to toast the Taoiseach, Mr. Barrett, and all of you on St. Patrick's Day. Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Vice President Kamala Harris at a breakfast with the Irish Prime Minister at the Vice President's residence. This morning, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy tweeted, "The annual Friends of Ireland luncheon began in 1983 when President Ronald Reagan and Speaker Tip O'Neill agreed to set aside politics in honor of their Irish heritage. As a proud Irish American, I'm glad to continue the tradition." On St. Patrick's Day in 1986, President Ronald Reagan, a Republican, spoke at a dinner to honor Speaker Tip O'Neill, a Democrat who was retiring from Congress. They were joined by then Irish Prime Minister Garrett Fitzgerald. From C-SPAN's video library, here's President Reagan.
Tip wanted me here. He said that since it was March 17th, it was only fitting that someone drop by who actually had known St. Patrick. And that's true, Tip. I did know St. Patrick. In fact, we both changed to the same political party at about the same time. Now, it's true that Tip and I have had our political disagreements. Sure, I said some things about Tip, and Tip said some things about me, but that's all history. And anyway, you know how it is. I forget. I just follow that old motto, forgive and forget, or is it forget and forgive? But ladies and gentlemen, I think you know Tip and I have been kidding each other for some time now, and I hope you also know how much I hope this continues for many years to come. A little kidding is, after all, a sign of affection, the sort of things that friends do to each other. And Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful you have permitted me in the past, and I hope in the future, that singular honor, the honor of calling you my friend. I think the fact of our friendship is testimony to the political system that we're part of and the country we live in. A country which permits two not so shy and not so retiring Irishmen to have it out on the issues rather than on each other or their countrymen.
President Ronald Reagan in 1986 at a St. Patrick's Day dinner honoring House Speaker Tip O'Neill. Also there, then Irish Prime Minister Garret FitzGerald.
Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, Reverend Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, Irish, and if there are any today, non-Irish. I am honoured to have been invited as head of the Irish government to join with you in paying tribute to Speaker O'Neill. I am very conscious of the fact that this is an American domestic political occasion. Indeed, earlier today on the Hill, I met someone who asked, "What's a foreigner doing speaking at that dinner tonight for the Speaker?" I was puzzled. The President looks Irish enough to me. The Speaker is Irish. Senator Kennedy is Irish. And it struck me, he was referring to Bob Hope. A young, unknown English comedian hired for the evening. But I was able to assure my questioner that it was okay, in the spirit of the recently signed agreement between Dublin and London, for Bob Hope to speak here tonight. And anyway, as I've discovered since I came here, his wife is half Irish. But seriously, the fact that I've been invited to join with your President and all of you in honouring the Speaker says much about the extraordinary relationship between the United States and Ireland. The ties that bind us go far beyond those that normally exist between two friendly states. There are over 40 million loyal, patriotic Americans, including many of you here tonight, who, in addition to your loyalty to the United States, have a particular attachment to and friendship for the country of your forefathers, Ireland. And nobody has demonstrated that affection and friendship for Ireland more than Tip O'Neill.
Garret FitzGerald, who was Irish Prime Minister on St. Patrick's Day 1986, from C-SPAN's video library, a dinner that included President Ronald Reagan, and it honored House Speaker Tip O'Neill. The current Irish Prime Minister Leo Varadkar's visit to Washington, D.C. concludes this evening at the White House with the traditional ceremony presenting the president with a bowl of shamrocks, then a musical performance with Irish singer-songwriter Niall Horan. Washington Today continues in a moment.
There are a lot of places to get political information, but only at C-SPAN do you get it straight from the source. No matter where you are from or where you stand on the issues, C-SPAN is America's network. Unfiltered, unbiased, word for word. If it happens here, or here, or here, or anywhere that matters, America is watching on C-SPAN. Powered by cable.
Welcome back to Washington Today, which you can get as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. From the New York Times, the International Criminal Court on Friday issued an arrest warrant for President Vladimir V. Putin of Russia for war crimes, a move that Ukrainian officials and human rights groups hailed as an important step in holding Moscow to account for abuses during its year-long war. The court issued the warrant just days before Mr. Putin is scheduled to receive China's top leader, Xi Jinping, in Russia. The likelihood of a trial while Mr. Putin remains in power appears slim because the court cannot try defendants in absentia, and Russia has said it will not surrender its own officials. Still, the warrant deepens Mr. Putin's isolation from the West and could limit his travel overseas. That reporting from the New York Times. The ICC president, Polish judge Piotr Hofmanski, posting this video.
Today, 17th of March 2023, the International Criminal Court has issued 2 warrants of arrest in the Ukraine situation. For Vladimir Putin, President of the Russian Federation, and for Maria Lvova-Belova, Commissioner of the Russian President for Children's Rights, for the alleged war crimes of deportation of children from Ukrainian occupied territories into the Russian Federation. It is forbidden by international law for occupied powers to transfer civilians from the territory they live in to other territories. Children enjoy special protection under the Geneva Convention. The contents of the warrants are secret in order to protect victims. The ICC attaches great importance to the protection of victims, especially children. Nevertheless, the judges of the chamber dealing with this case decided to make the existence of the warrants public in the interest of justice and to prevent the commission of future crimes. This is an important moment in the process of justice before the ICC. The judges have reviewed the information and evidence submitted by the prosecutor and determined that there are credible allegations against these persons for the alleged crimes. The ICC is doing its part of work. As a court of law, the judges issued arrest warrants. Their execution depends on international cooperation.
International Criminal Court President Judge Piotr Hofmanski, a video today. Associated Press writes Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov insisted that Russia doesn't recognize the ICC and considers its decisions legally void. He added that Russia considers the court's move outrageous and unacceptable. Ukrainian officials were jubilant. Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba said the wheels of justice are turning and added that international criminals will be held accountable for stealing children and other international crimes. The parent company of Silicon Valley Bank, the bank seized last week by the FDIC, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, after its collapse, is filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. SVB Financial Group, along with its CEO and chief financial officer, are facing a class action lawsuit claiming the company did not disclose the risks that future interest rate increases would have on its business. The Biden administration defended the decision this week to allow all depositors at Silicon Valley Bank and also Signature Bank in New York to recover their assets after both banks collapsed, using money from the FDIC. Over 90% of assets at those two banks were not insured by the FDIC. Former chair of the FDIC from 2006 through 11, Sheila Bair, telling CNBC today that she would not have done that.
I would not have declared Silicon Valley and Signature systemic. These are combined assets, $300 billion in a $23 trillion banking system. I don't think there would have been any systemic ramifications from putting a slight haircut on the uninsured depositors, which were those who were bailed out. If regulators were seeing a truly systemic problem with uninsured deposit withdrawals, then they should have, and I still say, continue to say, they should go to Congress and get approval to provide a blanket backstop against uninsured depositors at all banks. If you do these one-offs, you say, okay, we're going to bail out this one, or we're going to bail out that one, but then all the others are out there, well, what about us? It creates uncertainty, and the ones that do not get the bailout are under more pressure, as we were seeing with First Republic. You know, their uninsured depositors are uncertain. Are they going to get a systemic determination? So I think we've lost a lot of potentially. I think the optics around, especially bailing out Silicon Valley Bank's uninsured depositors, will hold Silicon Valley venture capitalists and their portfolio companies that they are. I think those are terrible. It would have been a small haircut, I think, just by announcing they were going to do an advanced dividend to the uninsured of 70 or 80 cents. Could have done a lot to calm the situation, explain to people this is an unusual situation, explain to people how the FDIC process works. We handled nearly 400 failures when I chaired the FDIC without a systemic risk determination. So that is what I would have done. And if they're seeing, I haven't seen it, though. I think the risk of this was that by saying it was systemic, these relatively small banks, people are now nervous. Well, what's going on? What's going on in the broader system? So if it starts to get out of hand, they need to go to Congress and get, blanket authority to provide protections for all bank uninsured depositors, not just a handpicked few.
Sheila Bair, former FDIC chair, interviewed Friday morning on CNBC. With more on the economy and the financial health of banks, we're joined on the phone by John Hilsenrath, senior writer at the Wall Street Journal. Thank you for being with us. One of your articles this week begins that banking sector turmoil raises the odds that the U.S. economy, already widely seen as prone to recession, might actually tip into one. What are the chances?
Yeah, that's right. Well, a lot of economists that we've been talking to thought the U.S. was going into a recession anyway this year. We survey analysts every 3 months, and in January, the majority of those forecasters that we talked to said there would be a recession in 2023. Among the minority, the probability is now rising. So financial turmoil affects banks and their willingness to lend. It also affects the confidence of households and businesses. If banks lend less, if businesses are less confident, if households are less confident, that could lead to less spending, less investment, and a recession.
All eyes are on the Federal Reserve meeting next week. What are they going to do with interest rates?
Well, that's the trillion-dollar question on Wall Street, it seems, every day. The Fed has been raising short-term interest rates very aggressively for over a year to try to tame inflation, which has moved well above its 2% target. Now, with the risk of financial instability, the Fed has another problem on its hands, and they might decide to pause these interest rate increases until the markets and the bank panic settles down.
The Biden administration came out forcefully this week defending their actions to guarantee all depositors in the Silicon Valley Bank and the Signature Bank, the two that have failed. What has been the reaction among members of Congress and the public, the investors, to those steps?
Well, these moments are always very fraught. I was involved in covering the 2008 financial crisis, and bailout is a dirty word in Washington. A lot of banks were propped up in 2008, and it really upset the public at a time when unemployment was rising, households were being foreclosed upon. To see banks being propped up, the economy depends on the banks, so it was seen as necessary. What the Biden administration did last week was to support the depositors in the banks, and that's a tactic as old as the Federal Deposit Insurance Corp, which was created in the 1930s. Still, when the word bailout is used, what they did in this case is to guarantee the deposits of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank beyond the $250,000 federally mandated limit. So it was a bailout of depositors in this case. We can't say yet whether it worked. I mean, we've had a very volatile marketplace this week. We've had problems at other banks, including the large Swiss bank, Credit Suisse, needing support from the Swiss government. So we can't say we're in the clear yet, but the goal of the Biden administration was to stop the panic. Things settled one day and then became disruptive another. So we still have a ways to go before we can say that the coast is clear and the system is stable.
We're talking with John Hilsenrath from the Wall Street Journal. President Biden came out today and called for Congress to pass legislation to hold bank executives accountable when things go wrong at their banks. Do you know what he wants specifically and whether Congress is likely to pass it?
Well, I mean, again, this gets back to the scars of the 2008 episode. It led to a populist backlash in the United States because people saw banks getting bailed out, and CEOs, when they did depart, they departed with golden parachutes. And Biden administration is trying to get in front of that. Stabilizing the system is very unpopular in moments like this, and so that is a move on his part. The other thing that they did last week was they immediately said that they were removing the executives at Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank when they were closed by the Federal Deposit Insurance Corp. There's going to be a lot of debate and reverberations in Congress after that. Frankly, I think the bigger debate isn't so much what happens to executives, but what happens to deposit insurance. He's also looking at asking Congress to increase those insurance limits from $250,000 per account, and that can't be done lightly. It comes with a cost in terms of how you fund it, and it also comes with potential costs in terms of encouraging risky behavior by the banks and their depositors in the future.
A final question. It was brought up by Senator Mark Warner in yesterday's hearing with the Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen that it was social media that played a bit of a role in the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank. People were tweeting their lack of confidence, and that just sort of exploded. It reminded me of the flash crash on Wall Street some time ago when it was computers that were dealing with the trading, that were controlling the trading. And in this case, it's humans, but they're networked through social media.
Yeah.
What role might have that played in?
Here we go again with Twitter adding to the greater social good.
Yeah, is there any way to deal with that?
Well, technology speeds things up, and it networks people, as you say. And so, a bank run, in the 1930s, when we had bank runs, and we had many of them, if you've seen this, It's a Wonderful Life, that was an example of one. Back in the 1930s, people literally lined up at the bank to ask the tellers for their money back. Now with electronic banking, not only does word spread fast, but you could literally be sitting on the tarmac at an airport and try to move your money instantaneously. So it is a new facet of how these shocks can spread very quickly.
John Hilsenrath, senior writer at the Wall Street Journal. Find his stories at WSJ.com. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
On Wall Street, the Dow down 384, S&P down 43, NASDAQ down 86. The late Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg honored today at the Supreme Court by her former law clerks. Justice Ginsburg served 27 years from 1993 until her death in 2020 at age 87. Today's ceremonies were formally a meeting of the Supreme Court bar, followed by a special session of the court. One of the former law clerks to Justice Ginsburg, Elizabeth Prelogger, who is now U.S. Solicitor General, remembering Ruth Bader Ginsburg first for her fight against social injustice.
One of her big cases, litigated in the 10th Circuit alongside her husband Marty, was Moritz versus Commissioner. It involved a tax code provision that allowed single women, but not single men, to deduct the cost of caring for an elderly dependent. The case is memorably depicted in the movie On the Basis of Sex, but I'll always remember hearing the story firsthand at a dinner that the Ginsburgs hosted for us clerks during our clerkship year. As they told it, Marty learned about the case through his tax practice and ran into Justice Ginsburg's room to tell her that she needed to read the lower court decision. She said, "Marty, you know I don't read tax cases." He said, "Well, you need to read this one." At the oral argument, they divided the argument time, and Marty went first. He told us that as he was delivering his argument, she started tugging on his sleeve because he was going on too long. Without missing a beat, the justice quipped, "You were cutting into my time." Of course, they won the case. When the Solicitor General sought review in this court, he attached an appendix listing all of the federal statutes that would be called into question by the 10th Circuit's decision because they classified based on sex. Justice Ginsburg later described the appendix as a treasure trove. It turned into a sort of target list, and she took aim at many of those statutes in the year ahead. So whatever else I do as Solicitor General, I won't be filing any appendices like that.
Elizabeth Prelogger, U.S. Solicitor General and former law clerk to the late Supreme Court Justice. Elizabeth Prelogger also telling stories about what it was like to be a clerk for Justice Ginsburg.
Here at the court, she mentored her law clerks in countless ways. She insisted on mastering the facts of every case, reminding us that the court's cases are about real people with real problems. Clerking for her was also a master class in legal writing. She edited opinions by hand, so we would triple space the drafts to leave plenty of room for her notes, and she had no trouble filling that space with red ink. If she wanted to reorganize the draft, she would literally cut out a paragraph and tape it somewhere else on the paper, so it was an old school cut and paste. And then when she finished, she would call the law clerk into her office and go over the revisions one by one to explain her thinking. It was an amazing opportunity to learn about the craft of legal writing from an extraordinary writer. She modeled her incredible work ethic in many other ways. She was a famous night owl who would often stay up half the night poring over a draft line by line. The story was that she and Justice Kennedy, a well-known early bird, would pass each other going in opposite directions in the garage.
Elizabeth Prelogger, U.S. Solicitor General, former law clerk to the late Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, at today's ceremonies at the Supreme Court in Washington in honor of the justice. The Supreme Court website has a description of bar memorials that reads, since 1882, the Supreme Court has memorialized justices who have died with a meeting of the Supreme Court's bar, followed by a special sitting of the court. The bar meeting features a series of tributes to the late justice and concludes with the adoption of resolutions in memory and appreciation of the justice's life, work, and service. The resolutions adopted by the bar are then presented to the court in a formal ceremonial courtroom presentation. March Madness, the NCAA Division I national basketball tournaments, generating excitement from fans across the country, and that includes members of Congress. They've been tweeting support for their hometown or home state college teams and filling out brackets, trying to predict the outcomes of the games. Congresswoman Hillary Scholten, Democrat from Michigan, serving in her first term, has put together a little competition with other new members.
Hi folks, Hillary Scholten here. So if you're watching this, you know that I have launched a bipartisan bracket challenge with my fellow freshmen in the 118th Congress. We've got some great entries. Yesterday was the first round of 64 in the men's division, and wow, it truly put the mad in madness. I'm the daughter of a sports writer, so I can't help myself. I'm going to provide a little post-game recap here of our bracket, who's up, who's down, and who's going down. So here's where we currently stand. North Carolina's own Val Fauci is in first place with a commanding 98% accuracy. With 1,850 possible points remaining, Val is going to be tough to beat. But look out, Val, that guy from Guam, the Honorable Jimmy Moylan, is right on your tail, only 10 points behind. The Bagel Caucus had a hard day, with Dan Goldman bringing up the rear. However, perhaps no one had a more devastating day in the first round than our newest member of Congress, Jennifer McClellan. Jen, we are so sorry about UVA. She had him going all the way. What a heartbreak. But you're not the only one with a busted bracket there, Jen. Most of us were with you, but not the true Cinderella believers. Scrappy Becca and New York Strikes Back called the Furman Paladins upset over the Cavs. We all were in the same boat when Princeton upset Arizona, though. The good news, folks, is that if your bracket is busted, if you didn't have your team in, we've got lots and lots of games left to play in the madness. It's truly anyone's tourney at this point. Up today, I can't wait to cheer on our Spartans at 12:15. But what I'm most excited about is that the women take the court to show the men how it's done. The round of 64 kicks off at 11:30. So freshmen, there's still a few hours to get in those ladies' brackets. I know I'm going to be flipping back and forth between my alma mater, University of Maryland, go Terps, and our gals in maize and blue, let's go Wolverines, around 3 p.m. today. So that's it for the morning recap. Tune in here for more updates and add your own. We'll see you back here tomorrow with another update.
Congresswoman Hillary Scholten, Democrat from Michigan, with that video this morning, and her Michigan State Spartans did beat the USC Trojans 72-62. President Biden posted his March Madness bracket on Thursday, picking the University of Arizona to win the men's championship, but that team lost in the first round in an upset to Princeton. The president has Villanova University winning the women's tournament. He added in a tweet, "As you know, in this household, Villanova always wins," reflecting his loyalty to Philadelphia. According to the NCAA, the odds of picking a perfect March Madness bracket are over 9 quintillion to 1. That's 9 followed by 18 zeros. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word to get the stories Washington is talking about sent to your inbox every day. Subscribe at c-span.org/connect. Have a good night and weekend.